Madam Chair, members of the committee, I will move House File 4077 be placed on the general register.
All right. Chair Stevenson moves that House File 4077 be placed on the general register.
Madam Chair, I also move the DE2 amendment.
Chair Stevenson moves the DE2 amendment. So Chair Stevenson, would you like to present as with the DE2 and?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, the DE2 amendment takes the Commerce Technical Bill, which is the underlying House File 4077, and turns it into the Commerce Policy Omnibus, which consists of bills that this committee has been working on so far this session. I'm not going to go through them line by line. We've heard the bills that are in the Omnibus Bill in committee and taken testimony, and there are some alterations and things that I'm sure we'll get to when we get to amendments. But I'm very pleased to bring this package before the committee. I'm very thankful for the hard work that members on both sides have done on the bills so far. I think it's a good package, and I'm looking forward to the discussion and debate today. And so with that, Madam Chair, I think moving to testifiers would be appropriate.
All right. First on the list, we have Peter Brickwitty from the Minnesota Department of Commerce.
Madam Chair, just a clarification on the two procedural for the bill author, if that's okay.
Certainly.
Thank you. And as Mr. Brickwitty's making his way down, that's fine as well. Mr. Chair, and to the bill author, you had asked us to go to the general register, and that's because there's no finance in here. And I'm just wondering if you are aware if there are going to be finance targets that are going to happen. And number two, will this committee be getting one? And if so, will we be having a separate finance bill, or are we going to end up bringing this back from the general register, amending this with finance, and then putting it to Ways and Means and back to the general register? Just looking what a glide path might look like in the future if there are targets, which I don't think they're going to be, but I'm not sure because we don't have any money.
Chair Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Driscoll, well, quarrel with the very last statement about not having any money. The state is in a very significant surplus, is in a healthy financial situation. To answer your procedural questions, this bill will not become a finance bill regardless of whether we get a target. This bill will be a policy omnibus, and it will stay a policy omnibus. It will leave the committee. I do not intend for it to come back. If we get a target, I would expect to produce a different budget bill at third deadline, but that would be a different bill at that time.
All right. So I'm not seeing Mr. Brickwitty coming down quite yet. Shall we move on to the following testifiers, and then we can circle back when he is able to join us. So first, we have Mike Bradley. You can introduce yourself for the record and begin your testimony. Oh, yeah. And as a reminder for everyone, we are timing testimony to 2 minutes as we have a lot to cover today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, members. My name is Michael Bradley. I'm a partner with the law firm of Bradley Werner. I want to thank Representative Stevenson, Representative Freiberg, for their leadership in bringing forward this policy bill. I'm specifically speaking on House File 4077, Article 4, Sections 1 through 11. That is the broadband franchising bill, also known as the Equal Access to Broadband Act. We are in support of the A8 amendment. That amendment does 4 things. The first is it expressly excludes wireless providers and satellite providers.
Mr. Bradley, if you could speak just a little bit closer to the microphone. Some of us are having trouble hearing you. Thank you.
You bet. The A8 accomplishes 4 things. First, it expressly excludes satellite and wireless providers. Secondly, it avoids the stacking issue that was raised previously in testimony by clearly identifying that there is one franchising authority, and it's a city. Thirdly, it addresses the franchise fee cap issue. It expressly puts in a franchise fee cap that essentially mirrors the franchise fees or fees that cable operators pay today. And lastly, it prohibits any fees that are inconsistent with the Federal Cable Act. So we support the A8 amendment to Article 4. I did want to also mention the benefits of franchising. It's important to recognize that local governments are the franchising authorities right now for cable, and the things that they do are things that no other entity in Minnesota is doing. I want to give 3 examples, if I may. First is making sure that all areas of their cities are equitably built out. And that is something that I talked about in my testimony before this committee before. But secondly, there's been 2 proceedings at the FCC just very recently. One is making sure that digital discrimination rules were put into place. Minnesota cities, as franchising authorities, were the only entities in Minnesota that were standing up for subscribers.
You just wrap up really quickly.
And then the last one is making sure that that there's all-in cable pricing. And so only cities stood up for subscribers to make sure that those kinds of rules were adopted. Those were adopted just this week. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. We have Assistant Commissioner Peter Brickwitty to join us from the Commerce Department now. Next will be Shannon Slatton. Mr. Brickwitty, introduce yourself. Proceed with your testimony.
Madam Chair, for the record, Peter Brickwitty from the Commerce Department. My apologies, I had stepped out into the hallway. Thank you to Chair Stevenson and the committee. We're very grateful for the inclusion of the department's policy bills in the omnibus, including the technical and housekeeping bill, which is the vehicle, our telecom policy bill carried by Representative Kraft, our weights and measures policy bill carried by Representative Tapke, the consumer protection bill carried by Representative Shaw, the securities policy bill, Madam Chair, that you are carrying, as well as our financial institutions bill, and the CSBS Non-Bank Data Security Model Act that Representative Freiberg is carrying. These bills all represent our efforts to modernize key provisions in the state statutes and rules, the governing telecommunications, securities, banking, mortgage, licensure, updating our gasoline blend laws, and a variety of other areas to make life easier for consumers and businesses. We're committed to continuing to work with Chair Stevenson on a couple of smaller provisions in the omnibus bill that we're still working on with stakeholders. Our expectation is that we will have agreement on all of those outstanding issues as this process goes forward. And I'll thank you for your time, Madam Chair. My last comment is, because I know he's watching, I would like to make sure that Representative Davids knows that in this bill there is a reduction in continuing education course hourly requirements for appraisers. Madam Chair, happy to answer any questions that come up forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Brickwitty.
No, no worries.
Next, we have Shannon Slatton. You can introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony. You will be followed by Daniel Lightfoot.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Shannon Slatton Schwartz, and I'm Executive Director of CCX Media and the Northwest Suburbs Cable Communication Commission. Today I also have the honor of representing MACTA, a trade association in the state representing 135 local PEG stations and 838 cities that receive franchising and PEG. The beauty and the challenge of PEG stations is that we are all different, yet we all produce unique programming that viewers simply cannot get anywhere else. Whether that's a city council meeting, a parade, a news story, or a game that produces a buzzer beater shot like you might have seen last week when Orono beat Benilde St. Margaret's at the last minute to advance in the state tournament. You might have seen that. That shot was picked up on local affiliates as well as ESPN. Why did we have that when other stations didn't? They stopped by, grabbed a few highlights, went on to the next game, but we stayed until the end because no one covers our community like we do. And we know that people are watching. CCX Media's website alone generated 1.2 million visitors in 2023 and 7.8 million on our YouTube channels collectively. But that's just the flashy stuff. The advocacy that we do that's outlined in our cable franchise agreement is also very important. And as people have switched to streaming through broadband services, our commission's phone number is still on the bill where they can call for help. It's the only local number there. And we answer those calls to try to help people who just can't seem to get what they need to get done with call centers or AI chatbots. We've also been a watchdog advocating for consumers on the national level. Cable commissions like mine are the only Minnesota governmental entities to file comments at the FCC advocating for all-in pricing to provide clarity for cable subscribers. Local franchising authorities were also the only entities in Minnesota to file at the FCC to support rules to prohibit digital discrimination. Our comments were cited multiple times in the FCC's final report and order. The advocacy that we do matters, the content that we create matters, and that's why we ask you to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Lightfoot, you can introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony. You'll be followed by Javier Vasquez.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Daniel Lightfoot with the League of Minnesota Cities. The League represents the collective interests of 838 member cities across the state of Minnesota. I want to focus my comments on two of the broadband policy provisions in the DE amendments that the League and our members are supportive of. The language in Article 4 include two important policy changes for cities across the state, including the ability, as you've heard, for local franchising authorities to franchise wireline broadband service providers who utilize public rights of way, as well as language that would remove anti-competitive barriers that for decades have made it overly challenging for cities to provide municipal broadband service. We strongly support the language in Article 4, Sections 1 through 11 from House File 4182, which was authored by Representative Freiberg. The language updates Minnesota telecom statutes to reflect the changing conditions of the market as more and more internet service providers seek access to our public rights of way across the state to deliver services by extending local franchise authority to include internet service providers. The provisions in 4182 will give local franchising authorities greater authority to manage valuable real estate in the public right-of-way, receive reasonable compensation for the use of the public right-of-way, and ensure build-out requirements to address digital inequities in our communities, as well as support local community media, as you've heard. We do support the language in the A8 amendment. This language is based on concerns raised from some of the provider community that we believe addresses a number of concerns that were raised, as Mr. Bradley pointed out. We also support the language in Article 4, Section 13 that includes language from Representative Kraft's House File 3679, which does remove unreasonable and preemptive barriers for communities seeking to establish municipal broadband networks. More specifically, it's the removal of the requirements that require a supermajority voter approval for the provision of municipal broadband. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lightfoot. Next, we have Javier Vasquez, followed by Tim Johnson. You can introduce yourself when you're ready and proceed with your testimony.
So thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Javier Vasquez, like the Puerto Rican singer from Menudo, Súbete a mi moto. So Executive Director, I'm the Executive Director of Sample Neighborhood Network, the PEC programming station in the Sample area. And in an age where digital connectivity and access to information are cornerstones of personal growth and community development, ensuring equitable access to this resources is more critical than ever. SPNN is deeply embedded in serving and uplifting its community, is pivotal, necessitating support for these two essential legislative bills. These initiatives are not merely about expanding infrastructure, it's about democratizing access to digital resources. These bills promise to bridge the digital divide that separates the affluent from the underprivileged by enabling cities to ensure uniform broadband quality. It's a move toward digital equity, ensuring that every resident has equal broadband access regardless of socio-economic status. This is vital for a community-centric organization like SPNN, as equitable broadband access directly translates to enhanced community engagement, education, and empowerment. This bill acknowledges the changing media consumption landscape and adapts to ensure that access to television remains a viable and vibrant platform for community voices. For SPNN, this bill could signify a steady stream of support, enabling it to continue offering a diverse range of programming that reflects and addresses community needs. For SPNN, these bills are not just legislative actions. They are lifelines that can ensure the continued ability to serve their communities effectively. The Equal Access to Broadband bill promises to level the playing field, making sure every resident has the opportunity to connect, learn, and grow. For the Sample Neighborhood Network, supporting these bills is not just about advocating for policy change, it's about committing to a future where every community member can thrive in an increasingly digital world. Please support the inclusion of the Equal Access to Broadband Act in HF4077, the Omnibus Commerce Bill. Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Finally, we have Tim Johnson. You can introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I am here in opposition. I'm a local attorney. I do construction and insurance law to the amendments in A9, which I think were maybe introduced last night, but I'm not sure if they've been added. So I'm not sure if my testimony is appropriate yet or not. Is it? Okay, thank you. So this bill, frankly, is probably one of the least consumer-friendly bills that we'll ever look at. The challenges with the bill are as follows. There are, I'm going to go through the subdivisions because it's the easiest way to look through them. Subdivision 1, and this bill is amending 325E66, which prohibits contractors from offering an inducement to get people to enter into insurance agreements with them when their house suffers storm damage. This law has existed for years. It does not need to be disturbed. The First Amendment to Section 1, as a lawyer, that adds additional language that's not necessary to the statute. It is not offensive, but you may want to revise it so people don't think that those are the only things it applies to. Section 2 is where the statute completely falls apart on a consumer level. Section 2 would state that the contractor and homeowner cannot enter in an agreement to perform work where insurance proceeds might be payable. Think of a flood, a water loss, a fire loss, a hail loss, unless the contractor provides a detailed written estimate, essentially shifting the burden of providing an estimate to make repairs from the insurance company to the contractor who is not getting paid for that. It is virtually the only duty that the insurance company has under the policy. Moreover, this bill as written would essentially prohibit homeowners who have an emergency problem, a roof is blown off in a tornado, emergency mitigation from fire or water, until the contractor has time to go to their office and provide a written estimate. This is by far the least consumer-friendly bill on the entire docket that I've read that is in front of you, and I would ask that this not be disturbed. Finally, Section 3, the bill would seek to add language that prohibits a contractor from talking about an insurance policy or construing it to a homeowner. That has been a part of Chapter 72B since 2010. I believe that if you put it in this bill, there will be confusion between the Attorney General and the Commerce Office as to who enforces this. And I would suggest, again, only as an attorney trying to be helpful to the staff, that that be deleted so there isn't confusion between the statutes. But to be clear, my biggest problem is that it would prohibit a contractor from helping a homeowner go inspect their damage before they've provided an estimate. To be perfectly clear, this is how it works for every single homeowner. They think that they have damage, they have their contractor come out. All of the good contractors in the state of Minnesota now will meet with the homeowner for free, do an inspection for free, and often they'll meet with the insurance carrier for free. The only promise the homeowner has to give is that if that work gets approved and the contractor is able to do it, that they will do that work. There is no reason to take that ally out of the consumer's hands, and there is no reason to prevent them from mitigating damage if it's an emergency situation.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. We have Bill Butler. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Madam Chair and members, my name is Bill Butler. I'm president of Butler & Associates Insurance Agency in Apple Valley, Minnesota, and next month marks my 20th year in the insurance industry, selling and servicing personal and commercial insurance products. I'm here today on behalf of the Independent Agents Association of Minnesota, the Big I, to express our strong support for the A9 amendment, which will curb storm chasers practices that exacerbate rising homeowners insurance premiums, and I'd like to thank Chair Stevenson for bringing this forward. The A9 amendment will prevent contractors from offering incentives to homeowners for pressuring neighbors into using specific contracting companies and filing an insurance claim. This will ensure that insurance costs reflect the true cost of insurance claims and not inflated by trips, gift cards, cash, and prevent claim churning. It will also prevent contractors from requiring homeowners to sign a contract without providing a homeowner a good faith estimate when a claim is involved. I'm not aware of any other instance where a consumer would sign a binding contract to pay for services without at least an estimate being involved. Many of the contracts I have seen have punitive termination clauses, and consumers can be left holding the bag if they decide to change contractors after an insurance claim is approved. I have a contract where a contractor was signed by one of my insureds that if they decided to not work with that contractor, they had to pay a 20% penalty on the claim if they decided to change contractors. As I shared with this committee during the hearing on climate change and insurance costs earlier this session, on an individual basis, gift cards, trips, may not be a big deal, but taken across a whole, this is piling on the higher frequency of severe convective storms and inflation pressures driving insurance claims. These contracts are part of the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. All right, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on this bill today? We see I have somebody coming down. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Madam Chair, Tony Mendoza, Counsel for the Minnesota Cable Communications Association. MCCA members provide strong, reliable broadband services that enabled Americans to continue working during the COVID-19 pandemic. They're strong partners in Minnesota's border-to-border broadband grant program, bringing broadband to those who don't have it. They have led the way in designing new broadband affordability programs. In short, MCCA members have brought Minnesota to the doorstep of universal broadband service, and they look forward to finishing the job. Let me be clear, the new broadband franchising provisions in Article 4 would stop Minnesota's progress toward universal broadband dead in its tracks and make broadband more expensive for citizens of the state. By its plain language, all broadband and broadband-enabled services covered by the bill currently provided today would become illegal on the date of enactment of this bill until the service provider obtains a franchise from a local government. The bill authorizes a new 8% local tax on broadband and broadband-enabled services. This bill was touted as the Equal Access to Broadband Act, but the millions of dollars that would be raised by this new broadband tax won't further any cause that makes broadband more affordable or accessible. 5% would go to local governmental general funds, 3% would be dedicated to public educational governmental access television programmers. The Cable Association also has concerns about Article 4, Section 13 that would remove the local referendum requirement protecting taxpayers from risky government-owned networks and protects private investment in telecommunications networks from condemnation. MCCA is also concerned that Article 1, Section 15 would duplicate and conflict with FCC and FTC regulations requiring disclosure of fees and surcharges to cable and video and broadband customers. We urge you to vote against the onerous new broadband taxes and regulations in the omnibus bill amendment. Let's not snatch defeat from the jaws of victory in our shared quest for universal broadband. Thank you for the opportunity to share our concerns.
Thank you. All right, looks like one other member of the public wishes to testify. You can come down to the dais and introduce yourself and proceed.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Andy Morris. I am the Public Affairs and Legislative Liaison at the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans. Thank you for the opportunity to very briefly testify on the A10 amendment on behalf of the Thai Cultural Council of Minnesota. The Council has been proud to support the work of the Thai Cultural Council of Minnesota in support of the Minnesota Songkran Festival, which has been held in May each of the last 2 years just outside of this building on the Capitol lawn. This event has grown rapidly since its first year in 2022, from 20,000 in its first year to 30,000 last year. As it has grown, the Thai Cultural Council has continued to explore partnerships with other Asian Pacific Minnesotan communities. The A10 amendment would allow the Thai Cultural Council of Minnesota to offer beer sales at Songkran, not just through itself, but in partnership with other organizations through concession contracts in a carefully managed area during Songkran. Funds from these sales would then go on to support the community and form an important part of future activities. This small but meaningful change will allow Songkran to continue to grow and serve as an important source of funds to support both Minnesota's Thai community and other Asian Pacific communities. We ask the committee for its support. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, not seeing any additional public comment, we will move to amendments to the amendment. Chair Stevenson, you move the A2 amendment to the amendment. Would you like to explain the A2?
Yep, I would move the A2 amendment. This is a relatively simple amendment that just provides some additional disclosure requirements for health insurance policies selling to school districts that should allow for a better evaluation from school districts. Members may know that school districts are facing some, particularly smaller school districts are facing some health insurance and pressures.
All right. Members, any discussion to the A2 amendment to the amendment? Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Stevenson, we did not hear this particular provision. I understand that. I'm just wondering what are some of the things that are going to help us to make it just a little more transparent. That's all I'm just looking for, because we've been working on this issue along the way, and I just want to know where the benefit's going to come from.
Chair Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative O'Driscoll. So if you look on, and you're right, and it's just been under development. It came as an amendment, and that's why we are, taking testimony on and things like that today. But, if you look at page 2 of the amendment, it talks about requiring disclosure of the structure of the health plan, the actuarial value, the type of provider network. I could list all of the things that are on there, but this will allow an apples-to-apples comparison as school districts are looking at their options, both in terms of private plans and also the PEEP opportunity that exists, that's more of a collective school district approach that's out there as well. So it just allows for an apples-to-apples comparison.
All right, Representative Driscoll.
Just a quick follow-up. Would this also include if a district wanted an HMO option as well, if they're looking and scanning the marketplace to see what's available?
Chair Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Driscoll, I believe so. It says all proposals for group health insurance coverage, and Ms. Pompu's nodding with me, so that would include HMOs. Yeah.
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Members, all in favor of the A2 amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails, and the A2 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Representative Tabke, you have the A3 amendment to the amendment. Would you like to move and introduce that amendment?
Yes, Chair Katiza-Watun. I move the A3 amendment, and what this is the last year we did work on the life insurance look back on suicide when someone commits complete suicide, and with that we changed it to 1 year. But as we were looking and working on that bill, we found some other outdated, obsolete language, and this is fixing that obsolete language, and this has agreement between insurance industry and NAMI. So this is agreed upon language moving forward.
Thank you. Chair Stevenson, any thoughts on the A3 amendment to the amendment?
I'd ask for a yes vote and appreciate Representative Tabke's work along with the work of the stakeholders to get this done.
Members, any further discussion to the A3 amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion prevails, and the A3 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Representative O'Driscoll, you have the A4 amendment to the amendment. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I move the A4 amendment to the DE2 amendment. And what this does is, in the property casualty arena, your insurance carrier or as a company that you work for as an agent may or may not offer certain types of coverage that a consumer may come and ask you for. And there's a place for the agent to place this coverage, which is called the surplus lines or the extended market. And what happens is oftentimes carriers know that whatever the request is going to be, they don't have that coverage. They may have received previous inquiries from people. And the way the statute reads right now is they have to get 3 letters of declination, which simply means 3 declines from carriers on this. This removes that requirement, and the department is in support of that change. What it does is it allows the carrier and the agent to immediately go to a surplus lines agency or provider for this to be able to save time for the consumer when looking for insuring a coverage. It's wonky stuff that this committee knows I'm involved with quite a bit. So.
All right. Chair Stevenson, any response to the wonky amendment?
Madam Chair, Representative O'Driscoll, it's an amendment that I can support. I ask for a yes vote.
All right, very good. Members, any further discussion to the A4 amendment to the DE2 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails, and the A4 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Next, we have the A5. Chair Stevenson, would you like to move and introduce the A5 amendment to the amendment?
Madam Chair, I move the A5 amendment to the amendment. This does some technical corrections to some of the agency bill proposals. It also removes some sections that are in the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee. These bills did not make it to the Judiciary Committee to be heard there, and the underlying bill is going to go to the General Register, not through the Judiciary Committee, so we need to remove those pieces of language.
Any discussion, members, to the A5 amendment to the DE2 amendment? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails, and the A5 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Look at us moving right along. Chair Stevenson.
Jinx.
Just trying to shine some sunshine on a snowy Friday. Chair Stevenson, you have the A6 amendment to the amendment. Any discussion after Chair Stevenson introduces the amendment?
Madam Chair, I'll move the A6 amendment. This updates the coordination of benefits language and modifies the non-bank security language from the technical bills. There is an oral amendment that is necessary on the A6. So on line 1.3, in between the words without and delay, we would like to insert the word undo.
Ms. Pompu, can you help us explain that?
Sure. Chair and members, this is just a minor oral amendment, and as it should be written out, it would be an amendment to the A6 amendment, line 1.3, after without, insert undo.
All right. Members, any discussion to the oral amendment to the A6 amendment, to the DE2 amendment? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor of the oral amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. The oral amendment is adopted to the A6. Any discussion to the A6 amendment as amended? All right. Seeing none, all in favor of the A6 as amended, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. The A6 amendment as amended is adopted. Chair Stevenson, would you like to move and introduce the A7 amendment to the amendment?
Madam Chair, I move the A7 amendment. This makes technical changes to the crypto kiosk bill that Representative Hemmingson-Yager brought before the committee. I understand she worked with some other members on the committee and with stakeholders and regulators to move the bill a little bit further and make it a little bit better. I'd ask for support for the A7.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Stevenson. I just wanted to second what you said about Representative Hemmingson-Yager's work on this. She did incorporate a lot of feedback from a lot of people, including myself and industry stakeholders, and this is what we've gotten to at this point. I think it's, I'm not sure it's perfect yet. I'm not sure if we've fully figured out from every possible stakeholder if there are some implementation problems, but this is a really important step in the right direction on a really important issue. So I appreciate you bringing the amendment, and I think this is a step in the right direction.
Any further discussion to the A7 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The A7 amendment is adopted after the motion prevails. The A9 amendment, I believe, is an oral amendment. And Chair Stevenson.
Madam Chair, I'll move the A9 amendment, and then first, I do have an oral amendment to strike lines 2.17 to 2.20. Those lines transfer enforcement of this provision from the Department of Labor Industry to the Attorney General. And similar to the earlier discussion about the Judiciary Committee, we need to take that out of this amendment. So that would be my oral amendment to the A9.
All right. Members, any discussion to the oral amendment to the A9 amendment?
Madam
Yep,
Chair,
Representative Schultz.
could we just restate which lines we're striking?
Certainly. Ms. Pompu, would you clarify?
Sure. Chair and members, we're on the A9 amendment. If you look at page 2, it's page 2, delete lines 17 to 20.
All right. Any further discussion, members, to the oral amendment to the A9 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the oral amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. The oral amendment is incorporated. Chair Stevenson, to the A9 as amended.
Madam Chair, we heard some, and I'll move the A9. I think I already did move the A9, but just to be safe, I'll move the A9. We heard some discussion during the testimony about this. This kind of relates all the way back to our first hearing this year, which dealt with the impact that the climate crisis is having on insurance markets, and specifically the practice of rebating or offering consumers financial incentives to pick a particular contractor. And in its more abusive form, it could be a situation where a contractor says, if you get some of your neighbors to sign up with me, I'll cover your insurance deductible or give you an even larger incentive. I have seen advertisements for trips to Caribbean destinations in exchange for a certain amount of referrals. These types of referrals, as I think one testifier noted, have been illegal in Minnesota for many years, these types of rebates and inducements, but they are still definitely happening. I have in my office a stack of examples that is about an inch thick that was provided to me. So this language clarifies, tightens up that requirement, and as we continue to try and keep our homeowners insurance affordable in Minnesota, I think this is an important reform. I'd ask for member support.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Stevenson.
appreciate the problem as it relates to rebidding. As you acknowledge, I think, or as you noted, a lot of this stuff that this is targeted at already is illegal, and I'm not sure that, as Mr. Johnson testified, I'm not sure that this really meaningfully changes the law with respect to that. I'm talking specifically at lines, 1.13 through 1.18 of the amendment. The last part of that, I think, is maybe a little bit of a change in the law, the Romanet 3. But I actually have worked with Mr. Johnson. I've worked in this industry. I worked in-house at a residential contractor, and so I've seen actually what I've seen examples of bad practices. I think that we should think about that. But I do think that subparts 2 and 3, stretching from the bottom of page 1 to the top of page 2, are actually written a little too broadly in ways that really do sweep in what good contractors do to actually provide a service to homeowners who've probably never had to deal with a insurance claim on their home, or if they have, they maybe done it once, and really provide a service and helping them, sharing their experience with them, helping them walk through that process. Sometimes that does involve signing some sort of a contingent agreement, and I have seen contingent agreements like what Mr. Butler is talking about that could, if they were actually enforced to the letter, be abusive. But again, we're talking about a contractor coming in, providing essentially a free service to and experience to a homeowner to help walk them through a process that the homeowner doesn't really have experience in. And there are good contractors, Minnesota-based contractors, who do that in a way that is providing an important service. And I think that 2 and 3, 3 in terms of interpreting policy provisions or advising an insured, there are ways that some of that is already appropriately cabined in by, they're not lawyers, they can't practice law, they're not public adjusters, they can't practice public adjusting. But there are still other things they can do to provide experience or, a service to the homeowners that I think is not something that we should be trying to prohibit. And so I am really concerned. I think Mr. Johnson is right that at least those provisions 2 and 3 are not really quite ready yet and do actually potentially harm consumers in this process. We don't want, contractors to be running up the bill on insurance companies, inappropriately. I think that's a fair concern to be taking advantage of. But I personally have helped contractors walk through this process and understand the legal landscape, and I think that this does hurt good contractors and potentially hurt a lot of homeowners who might get some helpful advice through the process by those good contractors. So I would encourage maybe if we could divide the amendment and approve part of it, but not lines 1.19 through 2.3.
Okay. Members, Representative Niska is, Chair Stevenson.
Before we actually do a motion to divide, can I just say this, that I think that what I heard Representative Niska say is that maybe there's some concerns that this is too broad, but also there's something legitimate there. I'm happy to continue the conversation as the bill moves to the floor and eventually to conference committee. There's still opportunities to tweak or shape the language, and I'm happy to work on it. I'll just tell Representative Niska if he brings a motion to divide, which is totally his right to do, I'll still be encouraging members to vote yes on both halves of the amendment. You do what you want, but I just want you to know that I'm willing to work with you, even if this goes on as we move towards the floor and conference committee on this.
Representative Niska, to your motion or no motion?
No, I didn't make a motion to divide, and I appreciate that. I'm not going to make a motion to divide. I think I'm going to vote against the amendment at this point because I don't think that it's ready. But in terms of if there's some additional enforcement we need to make sure that inappropriate gift cards aren't being offered. This is something that Dolly already does try to enforce. Maybe they need some more tools in that department. And if there's some way that we can target, particular practices related to contingent agreements that contractors enter into, I think something very narrowly focused on that might be appropriate. But the way that this is written right now, I think Mr. Johnson's right that it's anti-consumer the way it's written right now.
Chair Stevenson.
I would just ask members to vote yes on the A9.
Okay, looks like we have a couple more thoughts. Representative Schultz.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and Representative Stevenson. Absent just having this earlier in its own bill, I just wanted to see if we had maybe additional testimony that could be provided as to how prevalent of an issue this is, and if there's specific examples, whether that comes from, I think it was Mr. Butler, or if there's any information that could be provided from the department or even the Department of Labor if available today.
Yeah, Representative Schultz, folks from the public weighed in on this as well as other members, so I think we're not going to take any additional testimony now.
Okay, because this, Madam Chair, this would be our last opportunity on this in a public setting to get more information. That's my reason for asking the question, for specific examples of that.
Chair Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Schultz, we did, Mr. Butler did kind of talk about his experience with that and talked about some of the things that he has seen, and I'm sure he could provide you with additional examples. Like I said, I have in my office a huge stack of examples of rebating that occurred just like in the last year, and I'd be happy to provide you with a copy of that after the hearing to show kind of what we're trying to get at here. So I'm sure Mr. Butler could talk to you after the hearing, and I would be very happy to provide you with the documents I have.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I support the underlying intent of this, and I like the idea. The question I have is, again, getting wonky and parsy on some of this stuff, because we may have regulators back here going, we're not sure who has which jurisdiction on this. Under 60K, the agent is regulated. Under 72B, the public adjuster is regulated. Under the jurisdiction for contractors in the state of Minnesota, that's the Department of Labor and Industry. Now we're introducing the Attorney General's office in here. I don't know if there's a clear delineation as to who has what authority, other than the fact that I see lines 217 through 218 that basically strips the power of the licensing entity to take any disciplinary action against the people that they're purported by law to supervise and to take disciplinary action. It's being moved over to the Attorney General's office. I don't know that that's exactly what we want to do on here, is to remove the authority of the licensing entity and the enforcing agency.
Chair Stevenson,
Never mind.
the oral amendment removed those parts,
A
correct?
lot of moving parts here this morning, but nonetheless, if I were to guess what the chair is going to tell me, the oral amendment took care of that, Representative O'Driscoll, so.
Chair Stevenson.
That is what I was going to say, that we did remove the language you're concerned about. I did want to add, though, that the reason why we put that in there was because the storm chaser language we passed last year, which is enforced by the Attorney General, has been working really well. The Attorney General has been doing a really good job, and I think you've been hearing that when we had the hearing here, the industry testified to that effect. So that's why we were looking at that, but we did take it out by oral amendment.
I do see Mr. Cocking nodding in the audience as well. Representative O'Driscoll.
And again, I started my comments, I support the underlying of what's going here. I just want to make sure that we aren't overshooting the mark here and with our regulatory and who's got what jurisdiction. And maybe there is some additional time that needs to be looked at on this to come to that answer. So I think you're on the right track with this amendment. Okay. But again, I'm concerned that we have clear definition of who the regulators are.
Members, any further discussion to the A9 amendment as amended? All right, seeing none, those in favor of the A9 amendment as amended to the DE2 amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
The motion prevails, and the oral, the A9 amendment as amended to the amendment is adopted. Next, we have the A10 amendment. Representative Farr, would you like to move and explain the A10 amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll move the A10 to the D2 amendment. This is the amendment that that our last testifier spoke on. So the and regarding the Songkran Festival for the Thai Cultural Council of Minnesota. So this simply adds those that have concession contract with the council to those that can serve alcohol, again, with the permission of St. Paul City Council.
Representative Stevenson, any thoughts?
I think it's a great amendment. I urge members to vote yes.
All right. Members, all in favor of the A10 amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails, and the A10 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Next, we have the A11 amendment. So I will move the A11 amendment to the amendment. And members, this is going off of the bill we passed last year, and payroll processing services were included in one of our bills from last year, and they are there's agreement across the board that payroll processors do not actually need to be included. So this amendment removes them from what we had passed last year. Chair Stevenson, any thoughts?
It's a good amendment. Please vote yes.
All right, members, any discussion to the A11? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails, and the A11 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Chair Stevenson, you have the A13 amendment to the amendment.
Madam Chair, members, the A13 amendment makes a few changes to the junk fees bill by Representative Greenman, makes some clarifications, results of some work with stakeholders and other matters. I'd ask for a yes vote.
Members, any discussion to the A13 amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails, and the A13 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Chair Stevenson, you also moved the A15 amendment to the amendment. Can you explain? And
the A15 amendment, again, makes some technical changes to the 1989 ticketing fee bill, reflecting discussions, and also bring the bill in alignment with changes made in the Senate.
members, any discussion to the A15 amendment to the amendment? Representative O'Driscoll, do you have any Taylor Swift quotes that you'd like to share today?
I do have a comment. I hope this doesn't prohibit Taylor Swift from coming here, because that's a pretty popular thing, and that's this particular bill. So
All right.
I would defer also to my colleague, Representative Cagle, as we both have watched this over the years.
All right, members, all in favor of the A15 amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails, and the A15 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Representative Tabke, you have the A16 amendment.
Thank you very much. I move the A16 amendment, which is the earlier, I think it was just earlier this week, we talked about the percentage deductible. It's been a long week with the percentage deductible, and it requires that it is not only a percentage deductible that gets offered to folks, that it also includes a flat dollar deductible as well. So it's not just one or the other. It's making sure that people have options.
All right. Members, any further discussion to the A16? Chair Stevenson?
Please vote yes.
All right. All in favor of the A16 amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails, and the A16 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Next, we have the A17. Rep. Schultz, would you like to move and explain the A17 amendment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I move the A17 amendment. And the A17 amendment just adds an effective date that marks it to January 1st of 2025. As we heard in public testimony presented on the net neutrality provisions of this bill earlier during session, we heard that we are awaiting federal action on this topic. And so this is just pushing, and that federal action is expected to be heard during or decided upon during this calendar year, during 2024. So federal action would supersede, a state law on this, and so pushing this section out to January 1st, 2025 would just provide us a little bit of more of that federal approach to this issue.
All right. Representative Kraft.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Schultz. I think it's logical, and I'm fine to accept the amendment. I'd recommend a yes vote.
All right. Members, any further discussion to the A17? All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails, and the A17 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Next, we have the A23 amendment. Representative Niska, would you like to move and describe the A23 amendment to the amendment?
Well, yes, are we going to do the, just out of curiosity, the A8 amendment?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Niska, our nonpartisan staff had to be out of the room for a little bit. He's coming back, so we're saving that one for when he returns.
So,
Representative Niska, to the A23.
Appreciate that. So there would be an oral amendment that would be needed if we do adopt the A8 amendment.
Madam Chair?
Oh, Chair Stevenson.
Can I suggest that we instead take up the A26?
Certainly. All right, we will come back to discussion on the A23. Representative Stevenson, you have the A26. Would you like to move and explain?
Madam Chair, I move the A26. This is amendments to the debt bill that Representative Ryer is the chief author of and is working with the Attorney General. Much like the other amendments that we've discussed earlier, this reflects ongoing stakeholder conversations. Representative Ryer and all of the stakeholders have been working very diligently to try and find common ground, and I appreciate all of their efforts and ask members to adopt this amendment.
All right, members, any discussion to the A26 amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
All right, the motion prevails, and the A26 amendment to the amendment is adopted. All right, members, now we are going to move to the A8 amendment to the amendment, and Representative Freiberg, would you like to move and describe the A8?
Sure, I will move the A8 amendment. Sorry, just give me 1 second. So I had prepared kind of a detailed description of this amendment, but Mr. Bradley provided that in his testimony. Suffice it to say that the amendment addresses several concerns that were raised during the hearing on the Equal Access to Broadband Act. I don't know that it'll make everybody happy, but it does clarify the language and put some limitations in place. Happy to describe what it does in more detail if members would like a recap, but since it was covered by Mr. Bradley, I won't at this time out of respect for members' time.
Okay, Representative Niska?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Freiberg, for this amendment. I think it's better than the underlying bill. It definitely is clarifying in a lot of different ways. And I think it's important, again, that we remember that the bill has been justified on the basis of, supporting equity in building out broadband or supporting local cable access programs. And I think particularly clarifying, I think, for the public should be the language on the top of page 2 that says that a provider franchise fee shall not exceed 5% of the provider's gross revenues. So that's the first piece. That's just a pot of money that's just available to the cities. And up to an additional 3% of the provider's gross revenues dedicated in support of local programming if the local franchising authority or its designee operates an access channel. So this is an 8% tax to every consumer. It's of course going to be passed through by the providers to people, everyone in the city who uses broadband. It's an 8% tax, and again, the priorities are that the vast majority of it gets to go to the city to just fund their general revenue without having to put it on your property tax statement and have you understand that the city is taxing you for that amount. And only 3% is dedicated to the local public access piece. That's been the main justification for this. So, I mean, again, this is, like we said earlier, and it's ironic that now it's in the same bill as the junk fee provision, which has within it an exception that junk fees are not something that the government charges you. We are allowing all of our local governments to have a totally untransparent new taxing authority in order to try to raise revenue for roads or parks or whatever they would normally have to raise your property taxes to pay for in their city budget. Now they just get to put it on your monthly broadband bill, where you don't realize that it's there, where you don't realize that this is something that's been decided for you by your elected city council members, that they're raising taxes on you. So I guess I'm in support of the A8 amendment because it's better to have at least some cap and some clarity than a completely uncapped one. But I think that the priorities are totally messed up, Representative Freiberg, that you're just giving local cities, a new junk tax.
Representative Schultz?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the amendment's author. I wanted to ask, and I'm basing this off of the testimony that we heard from Mr. Bradley. I thought I heard him say that this was going to exclude satellite service, and yet I'm reading in line 1.6 of the amendment that is included. Could you provide some clarity for us?
Representative Freiberg.
Yeah, thank you. That's an exclusion of them. Let's see, I have marked it up. The language it modifies says it does not include an electric cooperative association under Chapter 308A, and then with the with the additional language, it adds into that exclusion a wireless provider or a satellite provider. But Mr. Eliff can confirm my reading of that.
Mr. Eliff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Freiberg is correct. This adds to the exclusionary part of that for the definition of provider.
Representative Schultz, any follow-up?
Okay, thank you. No, I mean, I echo what Representative Niska said, and, I think about it through the lens of this, this would allow for rural townships in my community to just add on a huge fee to consumers, to the township residents. And 70% of the people who live in my community live in townships. And this bill would literally allow for a very exceedingly small group of people to put in a new fee to the tune of up to 8%, and so I do have significant concerns with the Expensive Access and Bloated Government Act.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would just remind the committee that, I mean, it's in statute, a fee is defined as a tax. So this is a tax, a local tax that will, if we don't add this amendment, will not go before the people. And most of those things we take very seriously, right? We allow especially at the local level, we don't do a lot of local taxing without some oversight. Thank you.
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you. Just to Representative Niska's comments, it is appropriate, I believe, to have some revenue for cities in there. There are costs to cities of managing the right-of-way that this franchise intended to accommodate. I'm happy to keep working with you, Representative Niska, on this. As Chair Stevenson mentioned on an earlier amendment, there's opportunities as this goes to the floor, as this goes to conference, to keep refining the language. So happy to keep working with you on that language. But it sounds like you're supportive of this amendment, so maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Any further discussion to the A8 amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails and the A8 amendment to the amendment is adopted. Now, Representative Niska, would you like to take up the A23 amendment to the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And now it would be more appropriate to take up the A23 because of the A8, there's an oral amendment that's needed. And so on lines 1.4 and 1.5, I would request that the words political subdivision be stricken and add local franchise authority.
Right.
That would be my motion to amend the A23 amendment.
Representative Niska suggests an oral amendment to the A23 amendment to the DE2 amendment. Mr. Eliff, perhaps you could help us walk through that and clarify?
Surely, Madam Chair. Page 1, line 4, delete political subdivision, insert local franchise authority. Page 1, line 5, delete political subdivisions, insert local franchise authorities.
Members, any further discussion to the Niska oral amendment to the A23 amendment? Seeing Representative Freiberg?
To the extent my opinion matters, Madam Chair, I guess this makes the language consistent. So I'll withhold my thoughts on the underlying amendment, but I think this does make sense.
Right. To the oral amendment to the A23 amendment to the amendment, members, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right. The oral amendment is incorporated to the A23 amendment. Representative Niska, to your amendment as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Freiberg, for your support, at least on that part of it. No, this is a continuation, I think, of the real concern I have about how this thing works. And Representative Freiberg, I appreciate that there might be some small costs to maintaining the right-of-way. The idea that in any way is proportionate to 5% of the total, broadband cost in a city, I think is dubious and definitely unproven. So really what this is, the upshot of the, I guess it's named, or Representative Schultz has named it the Expensive Access and Bloated Government Act. It's creating a serious transparency and accountability problem with our local governments. It's allowing them to create a new hidden tax and that it does not need to be approved by the voters and is not clearly something that where the voters are able to hold their city council or township board accountable for it. So in order to remedy that, instead of saying, let's just strike the tax, I tried to come up with a compromise, which would be that the voters in that political subdivision or that franchising authority get an opportunity to vote on that. I had experience with this in our own city of Ramsey. There was a move to have a franchise fee, and then the Charter Commission considered a charter amendment that the City Council decided they didn't want to have a vote on that. Later, the City Council did approve a franchise fee and ended up resulting in a change in the City Council because there was a lot of concern about exactly these issues in the city of Ramsey. So I think this is just a pretty basic, pro-democracy amendment, and so I expect that we'll have a lot of support for it.
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Niska. I'm not supportive of this amendment. This places a roadblock in place that isn't there with cable franchises. I think broadband franchises should be treated similarly to cable franchises. I mean, generally speaking, we should let elected folks make decisions that lead their communities. And the example you cited, Representative Niska, of the city of Ramsey, you said the people were voted out because it was unpopular. That to me says the system is working as intended. This is permissive. It doesn't say cities have to adopt a franchise. So I imagine if the city is worried about the political ramifications of doing so, they won't do so. So I would not be supportive of this amendment.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Niska. I think that this is really exciting to bring forward a pro-democracy amendment that really puts this in the hands of the people and ensures the greatest participation, ensuring that it happens in the next even year general election. Exceedingly important to us, and especially when we consider some of the other negative impacts that we've seen made when local jurisdictions are seeking to get involved in, say, things like Uber and Lyft, and limiting our ability to get around places, including your own community. So this is pretty formative for us to ensure that we're elevating people's voice through the next even year general election.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members. I appreciate the discussion on here. We have an entire committee called, or I should say division, the local property tax division that I also sit on, and we hear requests for people wanting to do local option sales tax and other things which are referendum driven in many cases. Anytime you're going to be asking people to raise their taxes, particularly local level, it seems to me that we do this with school referendums, we do these other kinds of things. Why wouldn't they have the opportunity to be able to voice their opinion at the ballot box on this? Madam Chair, I'd like to have a roll call on this. I think it's that important that we want to know where we stand in raising taxes and fees.
Representative O'Driscoll requests a roll call. There will be a roll call on the A23 amendment as amended. Representative Freiberg, any further thoughts? Chair Stevenson?
Madam Chair, members, I would ask members to vote no on the amendment.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the A23 amendment as amended.
Chair Cotiz-Batune?
No.
Cotiz-Batune, no. Lead O'Driscoll?
Yes.
O'Driscoll, aye. Representative Bierman?
Bierman, no.
Bierman, no. Representative Cha?
No.
Cha, no. Representative Dotseth?
Yes.
Dotseth, aye. Representative Freiberg?
No.
Freiberg, no. Representative Cleavorn?
No.
Cleavorn, no. Representative Kegel?
No.
Kegel, no. Representative Kraft?
No.
Kraft, no. Representative Liebling? Not here. Representative
Excused.
New Brindley?
Yes.
New Brindley, aye. Representative Niska?
Yes.
Niska, aye. Representative Perryman?
Yes, Perryman.
Perryman, aye. Representative Farr?
Farr, aye.
Farr, aye. Representative Schultz?
Schultz, yes.
Schultz, aye. Representative Stevenson?
No.
Stevenson, no. Representative Tabke?
No.
Tabke, no.
There being 7 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail, and the A23 amendment to the amendment is not adopted. Members, next we have the A29 amendment to the amendment. I believe Rep. Schultz, you're going to move and introduce the A29?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I do move the A29 amendment. Again, I think we're saying in the exact same statute here. With that, the A29 ensures that on a topic like this, since we can't have full voter referendum on these issues, and since that idea isn't there, we want to ensure that this is really the consensus of that local jurisdiction. And so actually at this time, Madam Chair, should we also move an oral amendment to change the governing body to be exactly what we did before, the local franchise authority? I'd move an oral amendment to change governing body to the local franchise authority.
All right.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Eliff.
The 829 amendment is amending language on page 143. It's part of Representative Kraft's bill, so the oral amendment may not be necessary.
All right. Representative Schultz, further thoughts?
Very good. Well, same thing. I would just request a support for this so that it is the unanimous vote of the local governing body of that municipality.
All right. So Representative Schultz, are you withdrawing
Yes,
your
I am
motion for the
withdrawing.
oral amendment? All
Madam
right.
Chair.
Very good. Representative Cleaborn.
I would just like clarification as to what we're amending. Please, if we could have the author of the amendment tell us what we're amending.
Absolutely.
Okay. Representative Schultz.
Yep, we're on the 829 amendment. We are in we're on page 143, and we're going to line 24. And we reinstated some of the previous language that was in law, or is in law, I should say, currently. And then we're adding that a unanimous vote of the governing body of the municipality would result in the unanimous support of that governing body on the decision.
Representative Cleaborn.
I would still like to know what it is exactly that he wants to amend.
Representative Schultz.
Well, Representative Cleaborn, we are working right from the same bill, right? So we're using the language in this section.
Yes.
Representative Cleaborn.
Yes, but I'd like to understand his reasoning for wanting to amend this, please.
Okay. Representative Schultz.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Cleaborn. That's an entirely different question, obviously. This is seeking to ensure that if we're going to make a decision like this, that we are having, when a local jurisdiction is making this decision, that they have complete uniformity amidst their voting members. That's what this does.
Representative Cleaborn.
I just want to make sure, because you referenced this to a different bill and now different language. So I'm just wanting to make sure that we truly are on the same page as to what you think you're amending.
All right. Mr. Eliff, would you like to help clarify?
Madam Chair, we're in section 13 on page 143 of the DE2, and this is a section that speaks to municipalities having the right to own and operate a telephone exchange within its own borders. Current law requires a 65% vote of the population in the municipality to approve of that. Representative Schultz's amendment requires a unanimous vote of the governing body of the municipality to approve that.
Thank you, Mr. Eliff, for that clarification. Members, any further discussion to the A20? Representative O'Driscoll, excuse me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm hoping that if we can't have the people express their opinion like we did on the last one, that at least the people who the people vote and elect will have to have a strong consensus to do this in moving forward, as was provided in testimony and background by Representative Niska. In a community where there was some dissent, the body was removed on the city council who had that jurisdiction. Certainly, it's not inconceivable or a stretch that we would want to have a supermajority, if not unanimous, consent of the governing body to do major things, for example, in the telecom industry, to take away a private business and, for the lack of the term nationalizing, but municipalizing that service. I think it's very realistic that the city council or governing body should be in a unanimous decision on this and not just a simple majority. We're talking about major changes in the way that we're doing business in this state.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, and I would also like a roll call.
Representative O'Driscoll requests a roll call. On the 829, there will be a roll call. Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just add to that, I think the reason behind this these are really consequential decisions for local municipalities that can't be easily rolled back. I mean, they can unelect the body, but once these kinds of decisions are made and are in motion, you can unelect, but you can't undo. And I think that would be the reason for a higher bar in getting these things done. These are really complicated issues, and again, that are really consequential. And it is reasonable to suggest that there should be a higher bar for getting these things done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Schultz, that was your amendment. So the proposed language in the amendment actually would move something to more strict than what is in the statute, which we are trying to change. And we went through this when the bill was heard. So I'm going to ask for a no vote. I will point out there have been negotiations ongoing based on some valid issues raised in this committee, including narrowing when a municipality may acquire facilities based on condemnation, and I support narrowing it. But there's ongoing negotiations. There was a offer sent on March 11th. We're waiting for a response on that. But this amendment is a step backwards and would be bad for Minnesotans, and so I ask for a no vote.
Chair Stevenson, any thoughts?
I agree with Representative Kraft.
All right. Representative Schultz to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is a very serious concern when we're talking about providing this right for municipalities to do something that the private sector can do better. We don't have good examples to point to where government, especially in Minnesota, provides a service better than our private sector does. And so if we're going to move in this direction, if we're going to move in the way of allowing for municipalities to make that sort of decisions, to decide to get into something that the private market does better, that has to be uniformly accepted by that local jurisdiction and their governing body, which is exactly what my amendment does, and I encourage support of this amendment.
All right. The clerk will take the roll on the A29 amendment to the amendment, and the chair votes no.
Chair Kotisa-Wittsoon, no. Lead O'Driscoll?
Yes.
O'Driscoll, aye. Representative Bierman? Bierman, no. Bierman, no. Representative Cha?
No.
Cha, no. Representative Dotseth?
Yes.
Dotseth, aye. Representative Freiberg?
No.
Freiberg, no. Representative Cleavorn?
Cleavorn, no.
Cleavorn, no. Representative Kegel?
No.
Kegel, no. Representative Kraft?
No.
Kraft, no. Representative New Brindley?
Yes.
New Brindley, aye. Representative Niska?
Aye.
Niska, aye. Representative Perryman?
Perryman, yes.
Perryman, aye. Representative Farr?
Farr, aye.
Farr, aye. Representative Schultz?
Aye.
Schultz, aye. Representative Stevenson?
No.
Stevenson, no. Representative Tabke?
No.
Tabke, no.
There being 7 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail, and the A29 amendment to the amendment is not adopted. Members, finally, I believe we have an oral amendment from
We do, Madam
Representative
Chair, when it's appropriate.
Representative O'Driscoll, you can explain your oral amendment.
Thank you. Members, in the appraisal section of the omnibus bill, in consultation with the department, in consultation with some stakeholders, we'd like to remove some changes that are in here, and the department, I think, is prepared to testify if the committee has any questions on this. If you turn to page 12 of the bill, or excuse me, of the DE1 amendment, DE2, lines 12.13 through 12.17. It has to do with training for supervisory appraisers, and it's striking the language of a 6-hour course, and then it's also striking some other language for the titling of that course. My first oral amendment, because it appears in 2 sections of the bill, would be to basically delete the strikings of those and return it back to the statutory language that currently exists in state law.
All right. Ms. Pompu, perhaps you can walk us through that again?
Sure. Chair and members, we're going to go bold here and just take out all of Section 7 on page 12. So the motion is to delete Section 7 on page 12.
Representative O'Driscoll, is that your intent?
Yeah, as I was working with the stakeholders and stuff earlier today, since that is the only change, that we would be removing that section. And just one moment here as well. I think that would be the same thing that we would ultimately end up doing in Section 9. I would ask Ms. Pompo, okay, so that's easier than I
Ms.
thought it was
Pompo
going to be.
nodded.
So deleting Section 7, and those stakeholders are going to work with one another to determine what that number needs to be at some point in the future, but we're maybe just a little ahead of ourselves on that particular number. And again, I believe the department is here if anyone has any questions.
Chair Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Driscoll, I would urge members to support the oral amendment here. This was in the technical bill, and sort of an underlying rule of the technical bill is if someone opposes to a change, they take it out. So we should take it out.
Very good. Members, to the O'Driscoll oral amendment, to the DE2 amendment.
We don't need a roll call on this one, Madam Chair.
Very good.
For the record.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The oral amendment to the DE2 amendment is incorporated.
And then on page 14, Madam Chair, will be the second oral amendment, and it's basically removing Section 9, which has similar companion language in there that affects this topic. And I would ask before we leave this topic, I believe those are the only two references in this to that topic.
Ms. Pompu.
In this particular change that we have right now. I did not see anything else when I went in, and I don't want to create any
Chair and members.
stumbling blocks.
Ms. Pompu.
That seems right.
Right. Representative O'Driscoll, any further explanation?
A yes vote, please.
Chair Stevenson?
Likewise, please vote yes.
All right. To the oral amendment, the second oral amendment to the DE2 amendment, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Right. Representative O'Driscoll's second oral amendment to the DE2 amendment is incorporated, and to the underlying DE2 amendment, members, do we have discussion? Representative Schultz.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have a question for Mr. Berkwitty, if he is available.
Representative Stevenson.
Oh, I think he wants to ask, I will have a motion once we get done with discussion and before we take up the amendment.
Very good.
But I think we can.
Thanks. Mr. Brickwitty.
Welcome back, Mr. Berkwitty. I have a question. Working from page 125, this follows an earlier discussion had in this committee, but I want to gain some clarity as to how the department would approach this topic. So we're under the legislation that was brought, or the legislation brought by Representative Finke on gender affirming care, and I would like to understand better from the department how this statute would be applied for an individual's coverage if they are seeking to detransition.
Mr. Brickwitty.
Madam Chair, Representative Schultz, I left my folder for that bill up at my chair. So from memory, the department's position is that this bill simply codifies the existing standard of practice that is in place by executive order and has long been since 2015. So without my reference materials, my short answer would be in exactly the same way that it would be today.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the same question then, based upon current and common practice at the Department of Commerce, does that guidance provide for if an individual is detransitioning? So they made an initial decision to move from man to woman, and then moved, and then had made a second decision to move from a woman to man.
Mr. Brickwitty.
Madam Chair, Representative Schultz, again, working without my reference materials, my recollection is Representative Finke and perhaps one of the testifiers discussed this in their testimony when this bill was being heard, that what you're describing is covered in the definition section. So without my materials, maybe I would defer to counsel, but I think that is covered.
Looks like we do have one of Representative Finke's testifiers from that bill in the audience.
Madam Chair.
Representative Schultz.
I would certainly be welcome to coming back to this, at which time that you have the chance to go get your notes. I'm seeking to get not the advocates. I'm trying to get what the department's position is on this language and your common practice. That's what I'm trying to find out. So what the department's, based upon your conversation over the executive order, I'm seeking to understand whether or not that is covered.
Mr. Brickwitty, to the 2015 executive order?
Madam Chair, there have been a series of executive order, excuse me, let me not misstate. There have been a series of administrative bulletins, the most recent of which resulted from an executive order. Representative Schultz, I'm not quite sure I'm following your question, and perhaps we can follow up online. I apologize. I've stated the department's position, which is the bill codifies the existing practice that is outlined in administrative bulletin and in the executive order. So I wouldn't expect anything to deviate in any way, shape, or form from what is currently in place in the state of Minnesota for those individuals.
Chair Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Schultz, first of all, if the chair wanted to bring up a testifier to answer your question, that's the prerogative of the chair, not your prerogative. That's number one. Number two is, I think you heard Mr. Brickwitty say that we're not changing the policy with regard to deeds transitioning. If you want further clarification from the Department of Commerce, I'm sure he'd be happy to follow up with you offline. This is the second hearing we've had on this. You raised this at the earlier hearing. We had a discussion about it then. I think you've made your point. I think it's time to move on. Madam Chair.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Stevenson, I have an equal voice at this table, and I don't take your lectures very kindly. On constant occasions, you continue to come back to this table and tell me that my voice doesn't matter.
Personalities?
Mr. Schultz, Representative Schultz.
Madam Chair, I am asking a question of the department. As a member of the minority, this is my opportunity to get an understanding as to the practices of the department.
I believe that the department answered your question, Representative.
I asked a very specific question and did not get an answer to that, and instead I was directed to comments by the advocates of this particular language. I'm seeking to understand what the policy is and how that question would be for someone who is seeking to detransition.
Representative Schultz, I think we can follow up with the department offline. Thank you for your question. Representative Cleavorn.
Madam Chair, I don't have to add anything more. I believe we heard it just codifies existing practice. Thank you very much.
Further discussion, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just point out, I mean, I get that we can follow up online, but at this point, we're voting bills out of committee. Like, there isn't time to follow up offline anymore. It's reasonable to ask the department questions, especially at this point, and get answers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Members, we have an extensive amount of time prior to conference committee, so there will be time to follow up offline and work out any questions that the department can answer.
Madam Chair.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Chair Katiza-Watun. Representative Stevenson, I wanted to talk a little bit about the prohibiting social media manipulation provision of the bill. And in particular, I just was curious, I'm sure you have been, like I have been, getting feedback from, industry folks and other people who, have insight into sort of the workability of some of these provisions. And I was just curious about the state of those discussions and how you're trying to incorporate those conversations into, there are a lot of pretty technical requirements here that seem like pretty good ideas to me, at least a lot of them, but if they work. And so my question for you really is sort of a broader one about the state of those, how those concepts are being incorporated into this language, which I can tell has changed somewhat, including, I think, some particularly excellent language on page 36, lines 7 through 9, relating to the Attorney General's authority to enforce this law. But if you could just speak broadly to sort of that topic about what feedback you've gotten and how you're incorporating it. Thanks.
Chair Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Niska, for the question, and thank you also for the amendment that led to that language that you were just making reference to. Yeah, we have been working with stakeholders to refine this language with an eye to workability. You are correct to that. You know, I think members, there's obviously a long road ahead of us this session on this bill and on this subject. I think Minnesotans can be really proud of the work that's being done on this, because I think we are trying to tackle this question of social media and its impact on mental health in kids in a different way than has been tracked anywhere else in the country, and in a way that's more focused on the actual functioning of the system and less on trying to make sweeping content decisions. And I think that's really great, and I appreciate there's been kind of bipartisan interest in that and work on that, and I think we can be really proud of that. There's more work to be done, and I think workability is the place where we need to be focused, particularly in sort of, not in this bill, but in the underlying bill, subdivisions 1 and 2, which reflect both the engagement limits as well as the sort of prioritizing preference over engagement. We have to talk about that. I do think that, as in my conversations with some of the stakeholders in this, because this is a new idea, a lot of it is just kind of, what do you mean by that? What are you trying to get at? And then once we have that conversation, some of the workability concerns dissipate. They still remain. There's still more work to be done, particularly on those first 2 subdivisions of the bill, I think.
Any follow-up, Representative Niska?
Just one last comment on that, which is that I do think that it's the right approach as we're looking at this to try to help encourage a situation where users have control as much as possible over how they interact with the new technology and the way that that technology interacts with our human brain. And so we've had a number of conversations about this, but I think all of us who have access to a smartphone or a smart device and the ways that that affects the way that all of us think of all ages, but especially kids, should be interested in working on this topic. And I do like the overall structure, and I agree that there is still some work to be done. I did want, if we could, to turn to the junk fee provision, which is on page 18, and make a couple of comments, I suppose. One is that it is good that from the version that we originally saw until now, there are some safe harbors and some other things that provide some clarity to a few specific types of businesses. I think those are the results of, particular industry groups who have the resources to come to us and alert us to the problems in those particular areas. And that's good that we're doing that. I do still have some really serious concerns, though, for every other industry that doesn't fall within one of the safe harbors, that we are, again, as I said earlier, we're writing something into section 325D, 0.44, which is a deceptive trade practices provision. It's a provision that really encourages private litigation, and we are essentially opening up every industry that hasn't come to us and found a safe harbor to some really vague language in this bill. 18.11 says, is not reasonably avoidable by the consumer. 18.12, a reasonable person would expect. Representative Greenman, when she was here, is correct that those are like common law legal terms that mean that a judge looks at a whole bunch of cases after the fact and tries to then decide what a reasonable person would believe or what's reasonably avoidable based on a bunch of case law. It doesn't provide clarity to businesses who are having to navigate this landscape and have a litigation target on their back. So I still think that provision hasn't been fixed. And of course, as it relates to our earlier discussion, 18.14 and 18.15 are pretty interesting. They say, for the purposes of this subdivision, mandatory fee does not include taxes imposed by a government entity. Again, we're treating government entities in a way different from private businesses. We're letting our local cities have this new taxing authority. Again, not accountable or transparent to their voters in the same way that we are then requiring transparency and accountability for businesses, but in a way that they don't really know how it's going to work. So I think that those two provisions especially are kind of self-contradictory and mutually refuting of each other. But I do still, like I said, have concerns about the way that the junk fee provision sets up as well. So for a lot of reasons, I think there's some good in this bill, obviously, that I've spoken to, but it's not ready yet. Vote no.
Representative O'Driscoll.
I didn't know that I was on the list at this point, but if there are no other testifiers, I'll take it and we'll wrap it up.
To the underlying DE2 amendment, and then we'll move.
I have no comment. We'll just wait on the overall discussion on final passage of the bill from committee.
All right. Members, to the underlying DE2 amendment as amended, all in favor?
I need to make one motion before that.
All right.
After?
We're just voting on the adoption of the DE2 amendment as amended currently. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
The motion prevails, and the DE2 amendment as amended is adopted. And so, members, since we have had extensive discussion on the DE2 at this point, I will let Representative O'Driscoll make his final comments, and then we'll move to the chair.
And again, if there are no other comments, I will just back clean up if there's any of other members that.
Representative New Brinley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, I didn't bother to do an amendment because, I get it. I get how this works, and that's fine. But I just want to make one comment about the federal, the DIDMCA provision in the bill. We talked about this pretty extensively, and I had asked in committee, and it was confirmed that it will exempt credit cards. And so my concern is that by continuing to include this provision, and I hope that maybe we can consider this moving forward, is that we are exclusively removing options from folks, but we are not giving them any new options in this provision by simply opting out. And by doing so, I am concerned that right now, someone could have 2 or 3 credit cards at 32% interest or whatever it might be, right? It's a terrible position to be in. But credit cards are exempted, so they'll continue to be able to do that. However, right now, they might not qualify for a traditional low-interest loan, but they might be able to consolidate those for 22%, which is a significant benefit to that individual. Removing this provision does not take away options like going to Wisconsin and doing a title loan and putting your car at risk for that benefit, to be able to get access to money. So this takes away options, but we're not providing anything new in this. And if the market, and if there are nonprofits, whatever, I mean, we heard from nonprofits, right, who are providing great service for folks. But if that nonprofit still exists, they're still giving those options. I heard a term just recently, luxury beliefs. I hadn't heard it phrased in that way before. But I think, you know what, those of us sitting around this table, we all have a decent salary here at the House. We get a really nice benefit package working here for the House. And frankly, most of the folks around this table have additional income streams. And so most of us, not all, most of us are not in this particular position. And it's sort of a luxury belief on our part that we're going to say, yeah, but you shouldn't have any option that's available to you. And because we're not solving a problem, we're only removing a piece of the puzzle that could actually be a solution for some folks, especially, like I said, because credit cards are exempted. So folks are still going to be in a position where they're paying really high credit card interest, but we're removing an option to lower that while not adding any additional opportunities. And I think that that's a problem. I mean, I think if we can actually solve a problem and fix it and provide other solutions, I'm all ears. I think that that would be helpful. But right now, all we're doing is taking away a solution. So I want to put that on the table. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Cha, brief
Just for a
comments?
quick comment here. Thanks for the cable company SPN, Director Esquez, for coming down. I was a participant in the DocU program for 15 weeks at SPN. I took that program. I graduated from that program, and it is a great program. So please support your local cable and SPN. Thank you.
Again? Okay. Chair Stevenson, final comments?
Is it Driscoll?
Representative O'Driscoll, do you have any closing comments?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and Chair Stevenson. As I've looked at the work that we've done this session, and I look at the bills that did make it into this omnibus bill and the bills that didn't make it in, I sort of feel like it's the Academy Awards, kind of the other good stuff that didn't get done, and some of the stuff that did get in here that probably isn't ready for prime time. As I look at the spreadsheet that we put together on our side, and the things that we have highlighted in green were things that we thought we had common agreement on with you. We had kind of like the traffic light. We had red, amber, and green. We had some amber things on, and we also had some red things that were on here. Things that I think that are good pieces of legislation that are going to help Minnesotans and that are bipartisan because it's just good consumer stuff. The securities bill, the octane bill, some of the other bills that deal with consumer protection that were in the agency bills. You heard our members really not challenge anything that's in there because it's good cleanup stuff. Where I noticed there's one thing in here, and we also have the liquor provisions that were not overly controversial that we had. There was one that was very glaring to me that didn't make it into the omnibus bill, and that was the bill that allows 17-year-olds to be able to serve alcohol in a restaurant where they are supervised by a staff where they're currently serving food. And it's kind of interesting because I had a group of people from the disabilities community, and maybe many of you did as well, that stopped by the office to visit with you this week. And one of the priorities that they had on their list of things was for med passers. And if you know what a med passer is, it's the person who administers medications at facilities like assisted living or nursing homes. And do you know what they had in that bill? They were saying because of the shortage of folks that are out there and finding staff, that they thought that it would be a good idea to engage people in the industry at a younger age, and they were asking for med passers to be able to have the age reduced to age 16 or 17. I started laughing, and they looked at me, and I said, I wish I would have had you folks testifying in committee in Commerce the day that I had the 17-year-old servers bill up, because what you are experiencing here is exactly what they're experiencing in the hospitality industry. And I said, I wish you well on this because, and their logic was literally the same as I put out here, just substituting the type of job that we had, that they could continue to work in their junior year, their senior year, the year that they go to college, and come back and provide relief on breaks. And they said that they're being very successful in recruiting people. They want people who want to do more, who are responsible individuals. And they kind of laughed too. They said, yeah, we know people who are 21 who are probably not quite as responsible as people who are 17. Same arguments that we had here. It was just amazing. So I wish them well on their endeavor to try to engage the youth and the younger population into a meaningful part of the industry. Things that I look at on here that I'm not quite as excited about would be the bills that we just talked about here at the end of our conversation today. We as Republicans on this committee tried to offer and protect the consuming public by asking for the right to have them have a vote and a say on whether or not the franchise fees were going to go up, or to have a vote on whether or not there's a majority or unanimous consent of the governing body to go in and to decertify a telephone company and to bring that at the local level. I'm reminded of some conversations that we had earlier in committee this week where someone said, well, I don't think we've ever done this in a business before. And I brought up and said, nope, the telecom bill did exactly that. It was taking private sector business and saying, we can do it better, and we're going to let the locals do it. And again, by a simple majority. So if you have 5 council members in a city of the 4th class, mayor and 4 council members, 3 of those people are going to decide the future of your phone company. Not 5, but 3. That's tough. Giving the people the opportunity to have a voice. As I mentioned earlier today, we also have in the this legislature a division on local property taxes, which deals with many of these issues where those have to go before the voter. Why are these issues different than what we would require other taxes, which, as Representative Newbernley pointed out, taxes in statute are defined as fees? I think it goes all the way back to a topic called a health impact fee that a former governor talked about, and it all of a sudden had to become part of statute that fees are taxes and taxes are fees and forever forward. Today, when we bring that notion forward, that taxes are fees and fees are taxes, well, that's different. It's not different, folks. It's not. As I said, there's some good things in here, and we've worked in good faith to try to improve these bills and to improve this process, but we're not there yet. And I'm going to recommend to my colleagues, and I'll extend that recommendation to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, that we have a no vote on this bill today. Thank you, Madam Chair. To the bill author, thank you, sir.
Chair Stevenson, final thoughts on the bill.
I think we've had a good discussion today and throughout the hearing, so I won't speak specifically. I'll just say a major thank you to all members of the committee, to our wonderful staff, both partisan and nonpartisan, and to all members. I really do want to appreciate Representative Driscoll and the good working relationship that we've had and will continue to have. So I'd ask for a yes vote.
All right. Chair Stevenson renews his motion that House File 4077, as amended, be placed on the general register. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
No.
The motion prevails, and House File 4077, as amended, is placed on the general register, and nonpartisan staff is instructed to make any technical changes that are needed to reflect the will of this committee.